So welcome again in this workshop. This is a SPW online workshop for basic photography, and we will be covering concepts about basic photography related to camera settings and all, and we'll have composition techniques also, which will help you to improve your composition techniques when you start with your photography work. So welcome again. I'm the presenter for this workshop. My name is Sumit Hooper. And just for introduction, I'm doing this photography actively since 2017 in March, and I have over 3,000 creations in online gallery available. You can follow my portfolio on the Facebook. I have a lot of connections there, and I'm also keep posting my work in 500px also, the selected work you can find, and I'm active in Instagram also. You can find my Instagram page with the page handle Sumit Photo World, so you can easily follow my work and you can see what kind of photography I'm doing. And mostly I like to do street photography, creative portrait work, and I have some specialty in still life photography using glass, where I like to work with the glass curves and reflections, how we can present the glass in a more creative manner to make it look interesting to eyes. And for the practice or keep improving my skills, I used to do minimal artwork. Recently I worked with the tools just to check how I can work with the tools for minimal photography. And I have specialty in macro work also. And for basically street photography, I used to enjoy a lot when I was doing outdoor events for street photography workshop. And most of the time I like to create my images in a canvas art field. So most of the time you will see my images in the nature photography. You will see they have some different gradient effect that they look more like a canvas work. And I'm also offering my photography services through my website. It's a sumitphotowall.com. You can visit my website. You can see what kind of service I'm offering for photography, and SPW Expedition just part of it, where I'm offering all the photography courses and workshop. I'm offering different category photography workshops like street photography, online sessions, and glass photography, still using still life. In future I'm going to introduce other genres also, but these are just starting points. So you can visit my website and you can see the details, what kind of content I'm offering. And it's a very nominal cost workshop which I'm offering under SPW Expedition. So schedule for today's workshop. So we'll be having two sessions. Session 1 will be 90 minutes and session 2 will be 80 minutes. So we'll be taking 10 minutes of break in between just to get fresh out and take some water and sip. And during this workshop, whoever joined this workshop, I expect them to be unmute to themselves only when you have questions. So in the middle of the workshop, you can present your question. We can have a small discussion on that, and we'll be having separate Q&A session at the end of the workshop. So don't worry, if you want to discuss it later, you can note down your questions in the notebook or on a computer, and we can discuss in detail in the Q&A session. So video and camera sharing is not allowed, just for better experience. So if your internet bandwidth is not sufficient, better to just have this video camera sharing stopped on the Zoom. And because I'm just going to present the slides and information I'm going to share, so there is not much any need to share video from your side. Let's start. So how DSLR camera works. So basically when we talk about photography and we are in DSLR world, so knowing DSLR is the key to start with your photography. If you know how it works, the functionality, the component it has, it'll give you more control on the device. You understand that how it is working inside. So you can see the diagrams here for the DSLR. You can see the two diagrams here. On the left side, we have diagram where you can see through the viewfinder. So when you turn off your LCD on the DSLR camera, you can see through the viewfinder. That's how it is happening. You can see the line here, how it is passing through the lenses. It's hitting the reflect mirror. Reflex mirror helps making horizontal line vertical to reach the pentaprism. Pentaprism is a kind of house for a DSLR camera body, where it helps to convert the vertical line horizontal to pass through the viewfinder, so you can see the reflected image through the viewfinder. So whatever in front of you, it is showing as it is through the viewfinder. And when the moment of shooting, sensor, because it is at the end of the body, you can see the stripped line here on the 7th legend. This is the sensor. So once you press the shutter release button, it will make the reflex mirror go on top at the 90 degree, and it let the light reach the sensor directly, so it can record the image. That's how the DSLR complete the capturing. And whatever mentioned here, it is the same, so you don't need to worry about that. The content here, it looks quite big, but it's the same what I'm describing in a brief manner. How mirrorless camera works. So it's quite similar to DSLR, but we have some components which are not there in the mirrorless camera, like the pentaprism we don't have in the mirrorless camera. You can see how the image recorded. It's directly viewed through the sensor, so it's directly getting, so whatever we are viewing through the viewfinder, it is directly getting recorded on the image sensor. So they are connected through electronic signals. So that's why we called as a electronic viewfinder, EVF. So this is the new component introduced in the mirrorless camera, because there is no pentaprism, and there is a need for something or some mechanism to connect the sensor with the viewfinder. So this has achieved with the electronic viewfinder. And in the coming slides, we will see how the DSLR camera and mirrorless camera are different, and what are their pros and cons. The mirrorless system is more simple than the DSLR because there is no pentaprism. It's very simple. Here the sensor directly exposed to the light. So sensor is, you can see here, sensor is directly exposed to the light. This is the 4th is the legend, which is the sensor, and 3rd is the shutter release. So this generates a live preview of the scene directly to the electronic viewfinder. So as I said, it generates direct preview. It means so whatever you are seeing through the viewfinder, you don't need to use any preview button like we do in the DSLR camera. So whatever you are seeing through the viewfinder, you will get the similar kind of the quality, the effect on the final image. When the shutter release button is pressed, the door wheel slides up and expose the sensor to the light. And after that, another door slides down to cover the sensor again, so which completes the exposure, so image will be captured. So benefits of mirrorless camera. Mirrorless camera, as I said, there are few components are missing or not present anymore, like the pentaprism. So it's a very compact body, and sensor is very small. Smaller sensor means a smaller camera, and making the mirrorless camera easy to carry. So because it's a very small body compared to DSLR, it's very easy to carry, like a point and shoot camera. Electronic viewfinder. Final image preview appears directly on the image sensor, so offering live view, which then displays on the rear LCDs. So most of the mirrorless camera in the market, you will find they don't have viewfinder, they have LCD. So you have to turn on LCD to capture the image. So through the LCD, you can see through you can frame the image, or you can capture the frame. So you have to depend on the LCD, but some cameras offer viewfinder also, like the DSLR. So this image previews allows you to adjust the settings like exposure, brightness, saturation, contrast before taking your shot. So all the things which you expect to do in the post-processing or afterwards, so you can have it directly on the camera. Image stabilization. With lightweight, the camera is less prone to shaking because it's a very lightweight camera and you can easily hold the camera. So it's like you are holding some weight on your hand. So if you are holding 1 kg in your hand for 1 hour, you will get tired soon. So if it is like a few grams of device you have in your hand, you can hold it for much longer time. So this is the same concept, that it will improve the image stabilization when you are holding your camera. Silent mechanism. So fewer moving parts inside the camera system also means less noise. So because there is not much component compared to DSLR, it's with light body, compact one. So you will see there will be less of noise or very minimal noise compared to DSLR device. Higher shooting speed with better focusing capability for contrast detection and high shutter speeds, mirrorless camera models make it easier for photographers to capture a faster rate, because it's a directly capturing, or it's a direct preview. It's giving you direct preview through the viewfinder. So and the same image same will be captured in the sensor. So there is not much reflection kind of mechanism happening like the DSLR. We are converting the light on multiple path, so those delay will not be there. So you will see the burst capability is far much improved in the mirrorless camera compared to DSLR. So in the burst mode, some devices which offering DSLR, in the DSLR, some devices which are offering 8 out of 10, you will see in the mirrorless you will find 9 out of 10. So it's a kind of that improvement you can see. So this is the basic diagram for that mirrorless camera. You can see the components here, how the light traveling and shutter unit and image sensor, how it implant in that device. So what's the difference? So it's a kind of comparison we are talking about. Mirrorless cameras are more lightweight, so it's a plus point for that. Mirrorless cameras offer real-time preview of exposure and contrast. So whatever exposure and contrast you see on the device, the similar you will get on the final image. Mirrorless cameras have shorter battery life due to EVF. So electronic viewfinder depends on the electronic, we can say, power. So that's why it's used more battery, or it required more battery. So if you are having a mirrorless camera, then you must have a backup or extra battery for your device if you are going out for outdoor event. Mirrorless cameras are costly, and budget DSLR offer the entry level photographer more value than a budget mirrorless camera. So if you are looking for a device and you are just thinking about to buy a mirrorless camera, then I should advise you to go for a budget DSLR camera, because on the same cost you will find the budget DSLR camera will giving you more advanced features, or more, we can say, the accessories or whatever thing you need for improving your photography. And the budget DSLR is the best choice for you at the start, because the budget mirrorless camera, you will see they have we can say the less features compared to budget DSLR. So only these things you can see or you can compare that what features they have. Compare both devices, then you can decide what device is good for you. Mirrorless cameras offer fewer accessories. They are still lacking in their selection of attachments and lens mounts. So as we know, mirrorless cameras new in the market, so there'll be less accessories even from the manufacturer. And if you look for the established manufacturer like Nikon or Canon, they have mirrorless camera, but if you look for the accessories, you will find more accessories for DSLR camera compared to mirrorless camera. So that's the benefit of having DSLR camera. Mirrorless cameras shoot faster, particularly when it comes to continuous shooting or burst of images. So as I said, because it's a direct capture or light is directly reaching the sensor, there is not much reflection or mechanism to traverse the light. So there will be burst of images which you can capture easily. So you will find the good results average is far more improved or better compared to DSLR. So it's a plus point. Mirrorless camera offer more image stabilization. So as we discussed, because it's a lightweight body, you can easily hold it for a long time, and because you are able to hold the camera in your hand, and with image stabilization you can spend more time with your camera when you are outdoor. So you will not see images are looking shaky or blurry. Mirrorless cameras have a smaller sensor size than the DSLR. So It looks good when we read, but it's not like that, because in low light condition we need a camera with large sensor, and DSLR cameras having large sensor compared to mirrorless camera. So if you are having mirrorless camera, then you may find difficulty in focusing when you are in low light condition. Mirrorless cameras have a less accurate focus system. So when we talk about autofocus system for the mirrorless camera, they work on contrast detection rather than phase detection. Phase detection technique is used by DSLR. It cannot measure the distance between the lens and the subject as accurately as the DSLR. So DSLR can accurately calculate or measure the distance between the lens and the subject. So when we try to calculate our aperture, we try to calculate the distance also, because the more distance, the more depth of field you can get. And DSLR camera is good in that part. It can calculate easily or very accurately. So you can see you have DSLR is still having 1 point high compared to mirrorless camera. If you have any question till now, you can just unmute yourself and you can ask. So now we'll talk about exposure balance. We'll understand that how exposure in the device works and how we can correct, how we can get the better exposure when we are doing photography using DSLR camera. So how to make your photos lighter and darker? You can see the light meter on the top, and it's just an example that you can see there's an indicator which is in the middle. So it says that when it's at 0, image will be balanced exposed. So nothing will be overexposed, nothing will be underexposed. So we expect to have indicator in the middle. So when you are using your DSLR camera, in the manual mode, you can use the light meter, which will show in the info screen. So camera light meter is not error free. We'll understand why it is not why it is error free, camera light meter, or why it is not free. And when in what condition it is not error free. What are the conditions? High contrast scene can trick your camera. This is just one of the part. Using exposure compensation in different shooting modes. Exposure compensation is only available if you are shooting in your camera's program mode, P mode, aperture priority mode. A is in Nikon and AV in Canon. Shutter priority mode, it is S mode in Nikon and TV mode in Canon. So you can see the button also here, how it looks like on the different devices. In Canon, it's having plus minus with AV, and in the Nikon, it's just a plus minus squared, you can see. In the Fuji DSLR camera, we have dial button there. You can just scroll the dial and you can change the setting. Exposure balance. So now we will understand that what value we should have, and what background, how the background will impact our images when we are trying to adjust the exposure. So in the example below, you can see the vase is in the white background. If we add more light when we are doing +1 or +2, it means we are adding exposure. Or when we are doing negative values for the exposure balance, it means we are doing with purpose in underexposed, or we are stopping light. So a plus sign setting will make your image brighter than the standard exposure, while the minus setting makes the image darker with each movement up or down scale. So when we do any movement up or down, we call it as a stop or increment. A full stop adjustment will double or half the exposure. So if we do +1, so it will double the exposure, or it will double the light. If we do -1, it will half the exposure or half the light, whatever camera can capture. So on the 0, it's a natural. So for the white background, we expect to add light. Depends on what kind of field we need, the creativity. If for the creative work, we may with purpose can stop the light to get little underexposure, but depends on the kind of photography you are doing. You can have the exposure balance, and if you have more control on the exposure balance, you will see the image quality is really improved. And for the background, when it is dark, you can see the image here, the portrait one. For the -3 exposure value, you can see background is a little dark, and for the -2 we can see a little bit of background. So the separation of the subject and the background is key in portrait photography. So that is the key. So you have to adjust the separation, depends on the intensity of that darkness in the background. You can adjust it. If sometime it may need -1. You have to work with that. Depends on that what kind of feel you need in your portrait work. DSLR camera modes. So in the DSLR camera mode, so we have PSA and M modes. So these are we called exposure modes, and PSA modes are the semi modes. So it means some power part of settings controlled by the camera and some part controlled by the photographer. Like in the shooting modes, we have M modes. M mode is a manual mode, but we also have auto and scene mode also. These are modes which are fully controlled by the camera. When you are in auto and scene mode, you will not be able to control the settings. So it's a camera which is deciding. In auto and scene modes, the camera controls the shutter speed and aperture. So it's a camera which is deciding what could be the better shutter speed and aperture for the given subject or the frame what you are trying to capture. So these modes are also known as exposure modes. So when we talk about PSA and M modes, these modes are also called as exposure modes because they are deciding or they are helping you to decide the exposure. And the choice of elements will be, for the exposure, it will be aperture or shutter speeds. So only these things when controlled when we talk about exposure modes. So in the camera control, we have MANSP. It's in the Nikon device, and on the Canon we have M. M is the same as like the Nikon, but for aperture we have AV, and for shutter speed we have TV. And P is again the same in both devices. And in the info screen, you can see the DSLR device info screen, and whatever mode you are in, you can identify. Like here, it is showing M. So you are in manual mode. So now we'll see a little more detail about these modes. Mode P, programmed auto. So camera automatically adjusts the shutter speed and aperture for optimal exposure. So it means you are choosing one part. If you are selecting shutter speed as per your need or the demand of that frame, camera will change the aperture value to get the optimal exposures. If you change the aperture value, f value, so camera will change the shutter speed to get you better exposure, optimal one. So these are the pro modes which I referred as or better used for record shots. We also call it as a flexible program mode because flexible mode is giving you liberty to use this in any photography condition or for any photography work. Irrespective you are doing macro work, you are doing wildlife photography, portrait work, you can use this mode. But again, it is giving you liberty to control one part only. Either you can control shutter speed or aperture. And likewise, we have different modes. Mode S and for shutter priority, mode A for aperture priority. So it's a kind of mode P, but again, we could in mode S, in shutter priority mode, we could only change shutter speed. In mode A, aperture priority, we could only change aperture. So other settings will be controlled by camera only. So quite similar as like mode P, but mode P giving you liberty to select both. We can say the values, shutter speed or aperture. And mode P I always recommended to use it as a record shot. So whenever you are doing photography, outdoor especially. So take take a shot with the mode P every 30-40 minutes. So you will get idea what kind of aperture or shutter speed combination you need when you are in manual mode. So you can gradually control the camera settings in the manual mode, taking the reference value or exif settings from the mode P. Manual mode, as it says manual, it means both aperture and shutter speed will be controlled by the photographer, and you can have more creative work or compositions when you are in manual mode, because with purpose you can have frame underexposed or overexposed, or some part you want to get the exposure. So all this work you can achieve in the manual mode only. But if you are not working it right, it means if you are choosing combination which is not good for that given light condition, you can have images overexposed or underexposed. So be careful when you are working with the manual mode. So we therefore recommend use the camera exposure indicator as a guide when choosing the aperture and shutter speed. So whenever you are changing aperture and shutter speed in manual mode, see the indicator there in the info screen. You can see the light indicator. It should be around 0, as we discussed at the start. So in all the 3 modes, P, S and A, exposure is automatically adjusted for optimal results. Autofocus versus manual focus. So one of the most confusing aspects can be figuring out when you should use manual focus versus it's better to use the autofocus. So you have to decide that if you are having good control on the autofocus, or you are letting the camera to do focusing job, or you are taking control of focusing job. Most of the time it's the camera which is having more good mechanism for autofocus. It will help you to get the better work, but in some occasions you may need to rely on the manual focus. So we'll understand in the later discussion that when the condition can demand you to use the manual focus. Autofocus mode is one where the camera determines the sharpest focus using sensors that are devoted to measuring the focus of the scene. So as I said, camera is more smartest, or it has mechanism to identify where it can get the focus accurately, and most of the time it will help you to get the exact right focus. Depends on the light conditions. So on the camera settings, you can see how we can select the focusing modes. In Nikon it's a AFA. It is a auto focusing mode, so camera will decide if it has to be AFS or AFC. So we will discuss in detail just in coming slides. In Nikon, the screen will look like this: AF operations, where AI focus is a kind of auto mode, autofocus mode, like in Nikon AFA. So one shot is equal to AFS, and AI servo is equal to AFC in the Nikon. So both manufacturers having similar function in their device, but just for the sake of different manufacturer, they have naming standard differently. Autofocus, which focus mode you are in. So how you will identify you are in which focus mode? So in the camera settings, you can easily identify which focus mode you are in. In the Nikon, the left screenshot is from Nikon device. You can see AFA circled with the red line, oval. So you can identify there that which you are in AFA. So it means you are in autofocusing mode. And on the screen, the right side, we have from the Canon, and here you can see it's one shot. So that's how you can identify you are in which focusing mode. So to see which focusing mode you are currently in, press the info button on your DSLR camera device. So you will have info button on your device. You can press it and you will get the screen like this. However, the focus mode settings might be displayed using an icon or an initial with AF or AMF. Depends on device model. You will see the different initials are showing, but they will be quite similar to AF and AMF. Sometimes you can set the focusing mode on the interchangeable lens, so by sliding switch. So some lenses have sliding switch for the focusing mode. So be careful. When try to use the switch when you have available on the lens or on the device, instead of doing change in the camera settings, because sometimes we miss to change the or revert the camera settings back to default, and we miss to get good expo focus when we are in the shooting. Manual focus. So as we discussed, with manual focus, you are going to use palm on your left hand to cup the lens. So we have to hold the camera by making our hand like this, and you have to keep your elbow near to your body, so it will be more stable. So if you keep it away, there will be less chance it will shake, but if you keep it near to your body, you will have more control on your device. So then use your left hand fingers. So you have to use the same left hand finger where you are holding your device to slightly twist the focusing ring. So you can use your fingers, just thumb and one finger, just to twist the focusing ring on the DSLR lens until the image is sharp focus. That's how we use the manual focus. Holding the camera properly is a key aspect for making use of manual focus. So if you are holding your camera correctly, then more chances that you will get better focus using the manual focus mode. A sturdy tripod is recommended for manual focus. So if you have tripod with you, better to use tripod if that is allowed to use at that place, and that will give you more we can say the opportunity to get better result. Autofocus, AF. So AFS is single servo. We'll discuss it in detail also. AFS is a single servo, is good for stationary subject, as the focus looks when the shutter is pressed halfway. So if you are in AFS mode, when we press the shutter release button halfway, it will lock the focus, and we can complete the exposure by fully depressing the shutter release button. AFC is continuous servo, is good for moving subject. So if your subject is moving away from you or coming near to you, and you have to keep your focal point or the focus on the subject. Only that task you need to do, and rest camera will do by doing continuously focusing. And AFA is auto servo, allows you the camera to choose which of the two autofocus mode is more appropriate to use. So it means when you are in AFA mode, it is a camera which is deciding if subject is stationary or moving subject. If subject is doing movement, it'll assume that it has to be in AFC mode, and it'll take the shot using AFC. It means it'll start doing continuously focusing. If you are in AFA mode, auto focusing mode, and subject is not moving, subject is quite still, even if the person standing in front of you is not moving, camera think it's a stationary subject, and it'll take the shot using AFS. It means it'll lock the focus and complete the shot. So now we'll talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed, as the definition, it's the measurement of the time the shutter is open. It means how long the shutter is open. The time is calculated as a shutter speed. The longer the shutter remain open, we'll call it as a long exposure. It means it's a shutter which remain open for longer time. It means it's a long exposure. And if we are using high shutter speed, we'll not call it as a short exposure, but it's we can say the freeze, we are freezing the moment using faster shutter speed. So the faster the shutter speed, the shorter the time the image sensor was exposed to the light. The slower the shutter speed, the longer the time the image sensor was exposed to the light. So in the images below example, you can see the fast shutter speed is making the person look quite static still. It's looking in focus also, but on the image on the right, which is captured using slow shutter speed, everything is quite similar compared to other image, but the person is blurry. It means it's not camera was not able to make the exposure or we can say adjust the shutter speed, or we can say the person's speed was quicker or faster than the camera. So that's why that person did not capture. We have to adjust the shutter speed compared to what kind of subject we are capturing to get the subject as a still, or sometimes for the creative purpose like capturing a waterfall and something like that, we can have a long exposure to make water look silky or smooth. Shutter speed button look like this, the image showing on the screen. It's from the Nikon, and its values will be like the it's showing in the sheet. We can have as low as 30 seconds. So when you see numbers for shutter speed, when it's in digits, single digits, so these are seconds. When you see the fraction values, these are fraction of seconds. So whatever value we are changing, we will call it as a one step. And when we change step, so it'll like either double, we can say, let me just read it again. Choose the shutter speed one step faster than the shutter speed. It means we are referring to increasing shutter speed by one step and half the amount of time shutter is open. So the more faster shutter speed we will have, it'll half the amount of time shutter remain open. But if we do opposite, if we are reducing or lowering the shutter speed, what it will do, it will double the amount of time shutter is open. So it's quite similar to exposure compensation. What we have learned, that when we do one step on the left, it will double the amount of exposure. When we go on the right for one step, it will halve the exposure. So it's quite similar. So when we are working outdoor in the daylight condition, instead of doing any other change, we try to play with the shutter speed to get right exposure. Depends on if we, with purpose, we do not need a long exposure kind of, because the long exposure will allow more light and you will see the image getting overexposed. So all these things you should be caring about. So if you are using Nikon DSLR, shutter speed changes 1/3 steps. Some models also support increment of one step or half step. So all these minor, or we can say the technical things, depends or decides the cost of the device. Aperture controls the brightness of the image that passes through the lens and falls on the image sensor. So you can see the image here. So small aperture means we have very small hole where the light getting passed. Or for the large aperture, we have very large hole where we can have more light, but at the cost of depth. So we'll have a small f number where we'll have a decreased depth of field. So it means if you are focusing in the middle, something in the behind will be out of focus, something in the front of the subject will be out of focus. These techniques were very well used in the portrait work, in the wildlife also, to create very bokeh-like image. Bokeh means it's a very clean background or nothing can be identified in the background. So it's a quite blurriness used with the purpose. So it is expressed as an F number, written as F/ followed by a number, such as f1.4, f2, f2.8. So all these numbers are aperture numbers. You can have as high as f32. Aperture value used in frame decides the depth of field, DOF. So it's very important. If we understand depth of field, we'll have more better results in our photography if we are using depth of field in our favor. In the Play Store, in the App Store, you can find depth calculator, depth of field calculator, exposure calculators. All these are same, where you can feed in your device active settings and you will see what kind of depth of field you will have. So depends on subject, distance, your aperture, and the distance between the subject and the camera and the subject and the background. All these makes a good depth of field. Depends on how you are going to use it. So application will help you identify what kind of aperture you should be in. Depends on the distance between you and the subject. So aperture in the dial button, it's A, and the values it will be look like as low as f1.4 and high value will be f32. Raising f number one step referred to as stopping the light. It means if we are increasing f number 5.6 to f8, we are stopping light, so there will be less light compared to f5.6. This halves the area of the aperture or opening, halving the brightness of the image that falls on the image sensor. Lowering f number one step, it's like we are letting light to come in, so we are stopping aperture and f stop, but it will increase or double the area of the aperture. It means it's opening the eye of aperture of the lens, and it will allow the more light or doubling the brightness of the image that falls on the image sensor. And for increment, it will be the same. If you are using a Nikon DSLR, f number changes in 1/3 step. Some model also supports increment of 1 step or half step. ISO sensitivity. ISO sensitivity is a measurement of the camera ability to capture the light. So this is the, we can say, it's a camera, we can say the mind or the sense, how it sees the light. The more ISO, the more light camera can sense. So at the cost of noise. Noise is an artifact which can be seen only in the high ISO, which are there in the environment, but we cannot see at the low ISO. So digital camera converts the light that falls on the image sensor into electronic signals for processing. ISO sensitivity is raised by amplifying the signals. So it means we are raising ISO, it is raised by amplifying the signal. So we can say increasing the signal power to see or sense more light. So if sensitivity is raised from ISO 100 to 200, while the aperture left unchanged, the same exposure can be achieved with the shutter speed twice as fast. So if you are in a low light condition, when the shutter speed is getting low, you can increase the ISO, and you don't need to change aperture. You can increase the shutter speed to get same exposure. So that's how we can get a good image even in the low light condition, if you are able to increase the high ISO. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can choose faster shutter speeds and reduce the camera blur. So it means we can increase the shutter speed, but not that much. But we have to keep in mind that if we increase more ISO, it will take down the image value, or we can say the quality. We'll see more noisy or grainy effect in the image. If we do not want, then it may not work in our final result. So better to increase it only till which will allow you to hold the camera on hand. So when we say hold the camera in hand, it means the handheld shutter speeds, and handheld shutter speeds decides by what lens you are using. So if you are using 50 mm lens, you have to have your shutter speed 1/60. If you go below 1/60, because we don't have 1/50 shutter speed, it will be below that, and you will see the camera is not able to give you better image quality, and it will bring some shaky or blurry effect in your image. So when you are using 70-300 mm lens for bird photography, and you are using at full zoom 300 mm on a full frame body, you need to have shutter speeds above 1/300. And likewise, if you're in a crop frame body, it will increase the focal length by 1.5 factor, so it will be 450 mm. So you have to have shutter speed of 1/500. So all these things you should be caring about when you are using big lenses and in low light condition, increasing the high ISO. So this is why people say that ISO sensitivity should be raised if light is poor. So if light is not good, then only you should raise ISO. No flash, low light photography. So in the image below, you can see there are a couple of images for similar photo, where one photo is taken with the flash and other photo is taken with high ISO sensitivity with off flash. So if you are using off flash camera, so we have to use like a trigger like this. So this is the kind of trigger. This is high speed sync trigger, and the other trigger is is a manual flash trigger. So this is the kind of trigger you should mount or on your camera instead of a flash. You can use these triggers to control your flash unit. So when the light is poor, you can use the flash to light portrait subject. Flash units, however, have limited range. So all the flash units have their different ranges. Some default range of for a flash unit, it will be around 20 feet. If you have better, more advanced of flash unit, you will see they have 40 feet of kind of range. But all depends, and you need to identify the guide numbers. The higher the guide number, the better the range you will get. So in the flash unit, for the device details, when you see specification, you will see the guide number. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can optimally expose both the portrait subject and the background without using the flash. So if you are using high ISO sensitivity, you can have portrait and the background. So in the image, we can see the background also. But on the image where we use a flash unit, because the flash is having limited range to cover, to travel, so you will see the background is quite black. So this kind of effect you can see with the flash or without flash. ISO sensitivity, noise at high ISO. Raising ISO sensitivity allows faster shutter speed. So as we know, we can raise ISO and to get faster shutter speed, reducing the blur caused by the camera or camera movement, caused by the subject or camera movement. But in fact, raising ISO sensitivity can introduce a type of image artifact known as noise. So when you see grainy effect, we will call it as a noise in photography, making them seem grainy. Raising ISO sensitivity amplifies the electronic signals, which also amplifies any noise in the signal. So if there is low light condition, you will see more grainy effect. If light condition is good, even at the high ISO, you will see less grainy effect, which also amplifies any noise in the signal. As a result, the higher the ISO sensitivity, the more obvious the effect of noise on your photographs. The same is true of all digital cameras. We recommend that you raise ISO sensitivity only as high as needed to avoid blur. So again, it's just pointing you to use high ISO only until you get the shutter speed what you need for your lens. So the example image you can see at the different ISO, you can see the grainy effect. At the ISO 100, it's very clean. At the 12,800 ISO, it's very grainy. So ISO sensitivity can be set manually by the photographer or automatically by the camera. So by default, auto ISO is not on or not enabled in the camera settings, but you can turn on the auto ISO and it can take any high value. If you do not change the settings of the default auto ISO, it means you can set your minimum shutter speed what you need and the maximum ISO it should go. So as per your device, how much ISO it supports, you can set the maximum ISO. Like ISO 1000 is something where your camera works well, or if your ISO is above 1000, you will see the image is very grainy and you could not use it anywhere. So better to set your ISO 1000 and the minimum shutter speed as per your lens which you are using, so it will not go below your handheld shutter speed. So that's how you can use your auto ISO. Focusing modes. So as I said, we will discuss in the focusing modes here. One shot focusing mode. So one shot is AFS in Nikon and one shot AF in Canon. So which is represented with a single focus capability. It means we can focus once. So if you press shutter release button halfway, it will lock the focus on the subject and it will not do any further focusing. You have to fully press the shutter release button to complete the capture. In this mode, when you depress the shutter release halfway, the camera focuses on the subject just once. There's no continuous adjustment for the focusing. This mode saves battery power and is ideal for subject that aren't moving. So it will save you battery power because the camera is not calculating focus. So there is not much power needed for refocusing, and it'll save the battery power, and very good for stationary kind of subject. It can be anyone who is not doing so much movement. In the viewfinder, you can see the only one sensor is active, focal point, only one focal point is active. So where you have it, it'll do focusing only on that point. In the camera settings we have seen already. In the Nikon it's AFS, and in the Canon it's one shot. Continuous focusing mode. So as we understand, continuous focusing modes is made for useful for moving subject. So if subject is doing continuous movement, and you will not be able to track the subject focusing for good focusing if they are coming to you or going away for you. But if they are traveling in front of you parallelly, then you have to chase the subject to keep your focal point on the subject. For that purpose, you can use tracking function. If your device supports 3D tracking in Nikon and automatic focus selection in Canon, it's there. You can use those techniques and you can get benefit of continuous focusing mode. But basically it is designed specifically when you are filling your subject with the filling your frame with the subject, or you are able to have your subject in the frame and able to keep your focal point on the subject. The camera detects the subject's movements and refocus accordingly to keep the object sharp as it acts. So whenever you complete your exposure in a continuous focusing mode, you will get good sharp image of the subject. This mode uses a lot of battery power because it is continuously focusing and refocusing, and you will see your battery is running out quickly when you are in continuous focusing mode. So only advised to use it when situation demand. Otherwise you should be on AFS or one shot focusing mode. On the camera settings, you can see AFC in the Nikon and AI servo in the Canon. Automatic focusing, autofocus mode. So as we understand, autofocusing mode, it's a AI focus in Canon and AFA in Nikon. It's automatic focusing. It means camera deciding either it should be on the focus single shot or one shot AFS, or it should be in continuous focusing AFC. So it's a camera deciding, depends on the subject. If subject is doing movement, it will be in continuous focusing mode. If subject is not doing movement, or you are working on stationary subject, it will be on AFS or one shot. This mode maintains focus if you change the subject or subject moves. So if you are not sure subject is going to move or subject moves, then it is useful. But it has to be unpredictable kind of condition where you are not sure if it will be moving in the next moment or not. In that scenario, it can help you to get better focus. Manual focusing mode. So as we understand, it's a MF in Nikon, which stands for manual focus. On many lenses, you would see AF MF switches. So you can see the images here. On the device, you can see this AFM image, the switch. Or on the lens also, we have this AF MF button, auto and manual focus switch. So these buttons, if you find on your device or on the lens, then you can use those instead of doing change in the camera settings. Manually focusing the camera is perhaps the most frustrating barrier between the good and great photography. So at some point in time, you will see the manual focusing is giving you good results, but you have to get a lot of practice. Basically, when we use manual focusing, when we are working on the macro. So in the macro, we will have very shallow depth of field, and if we try to use autofocus, it is very rare we will get a good sharp images, because any slight adjustment movement by the subject, if it's living, or by the photographer, if they are not able to hold the camera, on the right place for the good focus on that particular area, then they can miss their frame. So it's better to keep practice and use it only for when you really think that you can control the focus area. It means the point where you want to get focus. If you are sure you can control it, you can use the manual focus. But it gives great result when you are doing macro work with the manual focus. Achieving perfect focus requires using the distance measurement on the lens barrel and even perhaps measuring the distance from the lens to the subject with the tape measure. So you can get better exposure with the manual focus if you have measuring tape. Many professional photographers carries measuring tape with them. They take the calculation of a distance between the subject and the lens, and based on that they can get the good exposure right. You using DAF calculator application, as I said, you can feed in the settings that what is the distance between the lens and the subject, what kind of aperture, what aperture you are using. All this will give you the exact depth of field, and there you can decide if the exposure will be the focus will be accurate or not. Manual focusing mode. So there is a diopter adjustment on most DSLRs. You can see the small button here. So this is we call diopter adjustment. What it will do, it will let you make the adjustment to the focusing capacity based on the irregularities in your eyesight. So you must have gone through the eye test. If not, you can ask your friend who has gone through the eye test. They use the similar kind of adjustment to identify where the eye is not regular or eyesight is not good. They do the similar adjustment, and likewise we have on the DSLR device. So you don't need to use your specs. If you are using, then you can use this diopter adjustment to adjust the capability of your viewfinder to give you good focus. You can also use the depth of field preview button. So as I said, when we were talking about mirrorless camera, in the DSLR device we have preview button. PV button is there in some devices, not all. So you can use this preview button to see what kind of image you will get on the final capture. Manual focus is essential when you focus on a non-traditional subject. For example, subject that is in the background when the foreground is busy and dominating. So as I told you that light meter is not error free. So it means camera can get confused when there is too much contrast or the background is so busy. Then camera may not be able to focus. It can trick your camera. So what we can do, you can switch to manual focus and you can decide where it should. So it will not try to recalculate the focus, or it will not miss any focus on the subject. So there it will help you, the manual focus. Focus indicators blinkies keeps works when you are in manual focus mode of lens. So there is a blinky on the Nikon. On the corner at the bottom, you will see one dot keep blinking. Which device you have? Hello? Hello, Krishna? Hello, Krishna? Hello, Krishna? I could not hear you. Okay, you have Nikon D200. So in Nikon, when you see through the viewfinder, not through the LCD, you will see a small dot at the bottom. So that we call as a blinky, and it will keep blink until you have the subject in the focus. So when you are in autofocusing mode, you focus on the subject. When you lock the focus, it will stop blinking, and you can get same function when you are in manual focus. So what you have to do, you have to apply same method. It means you have to press your shutter release button halfway, like we are locking the focus, but instead of lock, you have to move the focus ring. So when you move the focus ring on your lens, at one point you will see the subject is in good focus and the blinky will stop. So that's how you can determine that it's in good focus. So this is the technique you can use to get a good focus even on the manual mode. And in the Canon you will listen a beep sound when it get focus. So when the Canon, when you have subject right in focus, it makes a beep sound, and you can have same effect when you're in manual focus. So most of the time, except extreme low light condition, this could help you, because in the extreme low light condition you may not be able to find or identify if subject is in focus or not. So this could help you to get subject in tech sharp when having manual focus is on. Metering modes. So this is new topic. When we talk about metering modes, we have different metering modes like matrix metering, center weighted metering, spot metering. In Canon we have some additional metering mode like this, partial metering mode. So this is something different in the Canon, so we'll discuss in detail. So the metering modes are one of the most powerful and underutilized settings on your digital camera. How often do you change your metering modes? Can you come on voice, Krishna? You can unmute yourself. Okay, let me explain you. Best photographers always start with the best original photo. So if you have good exposure on the camera itself, then you will see you will have more opportunity to get better result on your final work if you have good exposure on the camera. So working with the metering mode is this something which will help you to get better exposure on the camera. And that can only happen when you get a proper exposure, and getting proper exposure depends heavily on how you control your camera metering modes. Matrix metering or evaluative metering. Matrix metering is something which you can see in the Nikon device. In the Canon, it's evaluative metering. Both function same. So this is the default metering mode for most DSLRs. So when you buy any DSLR camera, the default metering mode will be matrix metering mode. It reads the light from the whole scene and calculate the average exposure for the different elements. So it'll take the exposure from all the elements what you have in your image. So everything what camera can see, it'll take the exposure from all the elements and make a average value. It measures the several points from around the frame and calculates an average exposure. It is biased to the focus point selected. So it means it is biased to the focus point where you are focusing. If you are working with the one shot or AFS, your focal point on is something where it will revolve or it'll take the values around the focal point. But it also takes account several factors, including the distance to the subject, colors of the scene. So what kind of colors you have, it's a dark shade colors, light shade colors, and the distance to the subjects. All these things are also calculated in focus areas and other elements in order to find the best exposure for the whole scene. So this mode is excellent under the following circumstances. So depends on the light condition. You want to work fast with minimal change in the settings. So you don't need to worry about too much of settings over in your camera. You can work with the matrix metering. The light condition is changing quickly. Again, you don't have much time to adjust your metering modes. You can work with the matrix metering. You are covering actions and angle to the subject is changing quickly. So if you are covering a action in a wildlife photography, when we are covering some action, we can have matrix metering mode, and it'll decide that what could be the best exposure. The lighting and contrast are not extreme. So this is a key factor here. When it's not extreme, when it's not too dark or too bright, then it'll works great. It'll give you better results compared to extreme light conditions. In some cameras, extra weight is given to the point that is near to the focus point that is being used. So some devices giving more weightage to the focal point area compared to other devices. So you have to identify that how your device is working. Center weighted metering. This mode determines the correct exposure from about 60 to 80% of the actual frame. So whatever frame you are capturing, it will take exposure calculation from the 60 to 80% of area of around the center point. That's why the symbol is like that. You can see the center weighted, and the name is center weighted. So it's giving weightage to the center point. This mode operates under assumption that you will most likely center your subject in the viewfinder. So when we have subject in right in the middle, we expect to use center weighted metering. When you would choose the center weighted metering mode, in what condition we should have center weighted metering modes? It's perfect for event situations like weddings. So most of the wedding photographers, they rely on center weighted metering, because it'll not take exposure from the highlight or the bright light in the background. You don't want the background to influence your metering readings. So the exposure calculation, if correct, you will get the better image. You're trying to meter a light from the subject against a background. So again, it can be vice versa also. So when it's not too contrast condition, it can help you. When it's a dark condition, it means when it's a extreme contrast condition, just opposed to the matrix metering mode. So background is very dark or bright, and subject is very dark or bright. It can get a correct value in that condition also. You want to keep your subject in center within the frame, such as portrait. So again, with purpose, you want your subject in the middle. Most useful in event photography, as I said. So it's a wedding is like an event only. So event photography is quite dependent on the metering mode for center weighted metering, where the use of spot metering mode is not practical. So if you are in event photography, spot metering mode is something which may not give you better result or not desirable. You can have a center weighted metering. Now we'll understand what spot metering. Spot metering mode symbol will be the dot. You can see spot metering mode is the most accurate and the hardest metering mode. It means it will take the exposure calculation only from the focal point, and for the portion of 1 to 5% of the total image area that you see in your viewfinder. It's usually represented by a small red dot when we see through the viewfinder, and fixed directly in the center when you see through the viewfinders. When you're focusing in the through the viewfinder using spot metering, you will see one small dot in the middle. So you would use it by pointing it at subject element that you want to take the meter reading from. So when you have focal point on the subject, it will take the reading only from the point where you are focusing. If you are focusing on the bright part of the subject, if you have your focal point on the bright part of the subject, it will take reading from that only. Or if you are focusing on part which is not brighter, like dark shade, then it will take a reading from that, and you will see the different shutter speed you are getting for different point of focus area. The spot metering mode is extremely useful. It allows you to exactly fine tune the exposure. The camera won't be fooled by extreme contrast conditions. So as like center weighted metering, it will take value only from the spot. Like the center weighted metering taking value most 60 to 80%, it is taking furthermore 1 to 5% around that focal point. You can get an accurate meter reading from an object where you have a set of focal points. So when you are seeing through the viewfinder, you can find different focal points, but only one point will be active, and it will take only reading from where you are taking focus. So which focal point where you have, it will take reading from that only. It will allow you to accurately determine an exposure setting for a bright object against a dark background or vice versa. Again, as like center weighted metering, spot metering also help doing same function. When you are focusing on a dark subject or bright subject in against the dark background or bright background, it will take value from that only. So when you are in outdoor taking a photograph of your friend and there is a bright sky in the background, you can use spot metering to take exposure value from your friend's face, so you will get better exposure. It will not sell out the image. Make sure you always check your camera metering modes before shooting to ensure you are getting correct exposure. So always check your metering mode when you are shooting. That will improve your photographic results, and you will see that it's giving more better exposure or the correct exposure than before. So now we will talk about partial metering mode. Partial metering mode option is available when you are using Canon camera. Canon device is having partial metering mode. So partial metering mode is similar to spot metering mode with an extended area of the frame, which is metered less. It's light measures around 20% of the frame. So this mode serves as the middle point between the spot metering and center weighted metering. So that's why many photographers prefer to go with the Canon device when they are doing event photography, because it is somewhere between the spot and center weighted metering, and you will see it's giving better results. Similar to spot metering, it is useful when some areas of the scene would affect the overall exposure, making it too dark or too light. So again, because it's giving you mid value between the 15% or 60-80%, it's giving you 20% of frame where from where the image exposure will be calculated. So it has the few benefits: create a tight accurate reading from approximately 20% of the image area, works like the spot metering mode but takes into account a larger image area. So in the partial metering mode, it will allow you to calculate or take the values from the larger image area compared to spot metering. The metering area is often adjustable. So in the partial metering mode, if you get a opportunity to work with the Canon device in the partial metering mode, you can have a different section of we can say the area where you can select the area from where you want to take a exposure calculations, allowing you to move it around the viewfinder. So you can move those areas in the viewfinder to from where you want to take the calculations. Use center weighted metering mode instead of partial metering mode if that is not available in your camera. So likewise, in the Canon device we don't have partial metering mode, so it is advised to use center weighted metering mode instead of so now we'll cover our session 2 and we'll be mostly talking about composition techniques. So when we talk about composition techniques, rule of third is something which we always came across. So this is the most simple but most impactful composition techniques which we have. So when we this is one of the most talked about composition techniques, perhaps because it is so simple to implement, but also because of what it suggests, how we can get the subject looking more impactful. All you need to do is to divide your frame into vertical and horizontal lines, 3 equal parts. Like we have 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines. By placing your subject on one of your 4 points where these dividing each other, so where the lines crossing each other, intersection points, this is what we call it as a focal point also. So you have to keep your subject around those focal points. And if you have minimal subject like this, what we are example seeing here, you can have the vertical line covering covering the part of the subject, and you can have your focal points around the area which you want your viewer to look at. So like the one focal point is around eye and other focal point is around the feet. So this is the kind of composition you can create using rule of third. So this forces them to look around the image and make your composition more interesting. So that's the purpose of using rule of third. You can divide your frame into 3 equal parts. You can place your subject around those focal points, and you can have your frame look interesting to eyes. Cut out of unnecessary elements. Your goal when composing a photograph should be a point to do something. You want your viewer to look at what you are trying to show them. So when you are presenting any photo or doing composition for any photograph, what is your point? You want to show something to your viewer, and you want your viewer to look at the thing or the point which you want to show in your image, which you are trying to present. One way you can do this by cutting out all the clutter in the world and just showing them what you want them to see. So what you can do, you can crop the image and you can frame your subject by filling the frame. That is one of the technique. But the other way will be as a few way you can achieve this in photography, including getting closer to your subject using a longer focal length for a narrow field of view, using depth of field to isolate your subject. You can use very shallow depth of field, so everything in the background will be blurred, or from other elements in the scene, or using shadows to hide the things. If you have shadow part in your frame, you can use that also shadow to hide the other elements which you do not want to include in a frame. So using shadow to hide the things that do not contribute to the message you are trying to give. So whenever you are doing photography, you are trying to convey some message, you want to present a story, you want to show something which create a message. So in the example here, you can see the image on the left is a kind of unprocessed image where you can see the elements around the flower. In the final processed image, I added some vignette effect, and it'll help me to make the flower look more poppy, or image pops out using this effect. I saturated the color also just to give a canvas effect. But this is the kind of technique you can use to highlight your subject. So image on the left, we can feel everything what we see in the frame, but image on the right, final work, you can see we are just concentrating on the flower, the stems we have. So only this is the part which I want viewer to feel it when they see the image. Leading lines. One simple way to use line is for their drawing power. So when we see any line in our image, it helps us to see through the line. So we try to read the line when we see the image, and then it helps us reach the subject. Lines that are simply graphic can be used to lead the viewer around your image. These are called as a leading lines. So whenever you see lines in the image which are leading to your subject, that's we call as a leading lines. When you are looking at a scene and deciding how to compose it, consider what your subject is first, and then consider what elements in the scene might draw the viewers towards the subject. So you have to select it carefully, the lines and the elements you are using in your frame. Can you find receding lines? Like the receding lines you find in your frame, you have to identify what elements you can use in your frame. Like a fence that draws you to the old house on the hill. Maybe there's a crack in the concrete leading to a flower at a growing base of the wall. The viewers, I will naturally follow the lines, so they can be very useful in directing people to what you want them to look at. So If you are able to find a line in your frame, or if you identify a line while you are composing, then it'll add more impact in your image, because it'll add more dynamic power in your frame to convey the story and help your viewer to reach the subject using the lines. So it's helping directing people to what you what you want them to look at. So I have couple of image here. So just for example of leading line, image A and image B. You can type in, if your mic is not working, you can type in, tell me which image is looking more interesting, image A or image B. Which image is looking more interesting? Image B. Yeah, many says image B, but in photography we find diagonal lines look more interesting. So when you develop your composition taste by doing a lot of practice in photography, at some point you will understand that diagonal line is creating more dynamic effect in the frame compared to horizontal or vertical lines. So in photography, when you meet any professional, if you ask them to about these images, where one image is having diagonal line and one is having horizontal or vertical line, they'll prefer to select image where it shows diagonal line, because diagonal line is coming through the intersection point of rule of third and adding more impact in the frame. It create tension, it create dynamic we can say the feel in the image, which is more helpful to convey or looks more interesting compared to other line. So both are leading line examples, but one image is having diagonal line and other is image is having vertical line. Some people like image A, some people like image B, but in practical or in theoretical also, we prefer to have image with horizontal line. You must have seen leading line examples when you search through the internet. You will find many leading line examples where road coming through one of the corner of the image, either from the left or from the right. So they are coming from the corner and they look more interesting instead of coming from the right through the we can say the vertical or horizontal fashion. Repetition. Evenly spaced, identical, very similar objects can be arranged to create repetitive patterns in your photograph. So whatever you can have any elements in your image, like in the image, like in this image, I have leaves. You can see, if you try to feel this image, the most interesting part what we can see or feel in this image, the leaves, they are in repetitive fashion. So because they are in repetitive fashion nature, we like it most. That is the main reason or the beauty what I see when I was capturing this frame or creating this frame. I feel this is the most interesting part, and because it's in repetitive, it's look more interesting to eyes. Things like fence posts, the lines of pedestrian crossing, orchard of trees, so all these are just examples what you can fill in or you can find in your frame. Anything that can be arranged into a repeating pattern can bring a great intensity to a photograph. Depending on the subject matter, it may be calming, like a row of pillars on a building, or alarming, like endless rows of people walking in the time. So you can have repetitive pattern, but you can have a repetitive pattern. Depends on what kind of element you are using for repeating pattern. If it's a static, or you can say the like a row of pillars, it's give very calm and soothing effect. If we are capturing people walking in tandem in the same repetitive, they'll give you more dynamic effect, more alarming effect in the frame. Creating layers. So it's a very creative technique composition. When we do photography, we try to create images, and we try to focus on and some layers where something in the background blurred out or something in the front blurred out, or we can have focus on any of the layers. So we have to divide our frame into layers. So one technique for adding depth to your image is layering things over the top of other things. Some people say this technique is up things. Up thing is something we are creating layers in your frame. Simply put, you can cover part of your frame with the similar something closer to the camera in order to give you illusion of depth. So in this frame you can see I have included tree. This log I have included, tree log, as my first layer. I have focus, I got focus on the tiger because they were playing in the water. And the third layer will be the background. So you can use leaves of the tree to frame a couple in the park, empty juice glass while server pours the fresh ones in the background. So if you are in the doing event photography, you can practice this composition techniques. For an audience listening to a speaker on stage at a corporate event can make a good frame that doesn't simply show the speaker out of context. So if you are doing photography on a function kind of where presenter is speaking, you can have a frame where you can cover the presenter some part and also show the audience also in the same frame. It will add more impact and it will create a layer where first layer will be the speaker and the second layer will be the audience. All of these things not only fill your frame with the interesting elements, they further the story you are trying to tell. So it'll not just add more interesting elements like what we see here. We are adding different elements in different layers. It also adds you helps you tell the story around that. So it was very funny moment around that time. You can see the tiger were playing in the water. So it's a story where we have different elements covered in the image, which is completing or helping me or helping ourselves to tell the story. So first layer is the tree log, second layer the tiger they were playing, and third layer in the background. I got my focus around the tiger only, the splashes which I was trying to capture. Sorry. So conclusion here is, of course, these are not only the elements of composition. We have many more composition techniques, and I've covered 25 composition techniques in composition modules. So you can see through that. You can see through the composition technique names there. I have separate modules, so 12, 13 composition techniques in one module, and the similar count of composition techniques in second module. So composition style modules workshop I have just to cover composition techniques. So if you want to improve your photography, you have to improve your composition techniques, which will help you to get great results. In this basic photography workshop, only this much I could cover. It's more than the basic information, but I hope it'll help you to improve your photography. If you have any questions, you can send me email also. I hope that actionable points here, you find something which you can do practice later after the workshop, which will help you to improve your photography. And now I'll just tell you about the photo recovery software. I'm just collaborating with the Stellar. They are photo recovery software organization. They do make different softwares, and they also have a software for photo recovery. So it's we can say the data recovery software. So at times we were using these storage media devices. We can accidentally damage or delete the data, or somehow the files get corrupted. So sometimes the files and the device itself gets corrupted. We tend to lose the data. Luckily, with the tools, with these tools, you can recover the data from such type of data loss situations. So using this Stellar photo recovery software, it is available for Windows and Mac. So let me tell you just few features of this software. So it'll help you recover the photo. So if you have the photo deleted from your device, from your memory card or from your system, you can easily recover it. It also supports raw file formats of your camera. Recovery from formatted drives. So I'm not sure if you are that much technical, but hard drives sometimes gets formatted, or we have to format hard drive for some reason. In that case also, you can still recover the data from formatted drives, where you have the data which got formatted. Recover from bad sectors. So again, it's a technical term. When hard drives or media cards, as your memory cards gets damaged, they can have bad sectors where your computer will or camera stop recognizing the card. In that case also, it'll help you to recover the data from the corrupted memory cards. It supports the storage capacity of up to 6 TB. So if you have a hard drive with a storage capacity of 6 TB, it can still recover the data from that. SD card recovery. So it supports multiple memory cards and recovers photo, video, audio files from corrupted memory cards. So multiple type of cards it supports from different manufacturers. So for the rating, I gave this software for rating 4.5 because in the final phase, it will not allow you to stop the process. So when you start doing scanning, and in the final phase when you start recovering your files, it will not allow you to stop that final phase. In the middle you can stop, but at the end it will let you have to complete your scanning. So you have to have some spare time, and your computer or laptop fully charged, or if there is enough backup, you can run it to let it complete the recovery process. So it's a highly rated product, you can see. And if you need this product for a try for 1 month subscription, you can send me email for this software if you need it, and I'll help you to get the license for that for 1 month. You can use this software for 1 month as a full, and you can test all the functions. And for upcoming workshop, I have my couple of workshop in the next weekend. On 23rd Jan, I have my workshop for street photography. Street photography workshop is something my favorite one, because I spent a lot of time for this online photography workshop, and covering street photography online was a challenge. And somewhere around I having 150 slides for this workshop for street photography, and I'm covering almost all the points what we have in the street photography from starting to end. And I'm sure that whoever will join this workshop they definitely get something out of it. And it's a 3-hour workshop, street photography. I have similar workshop for still life photography for glass work. I'm specialized doing glass photography. How to get your glass photography in next level, you can get the idea on this workshop. And you can find schedule, complete calendar is updated on my website. You can find it on sumitphotoworld.com. And for the paid workshop, just for additional cost of 2000, paid workshop videos are already recorded and can be provided to participant if they request for lifetime access. And we always have a discount and offers for all the photography courses what we are offering. You can find the discount and offers page on my website, and you can get it. I always try to revise my content, try to include new examples. So I'm definitely going to revise all the content as and when required. And you can book your webinar seat if you are interested in any other workshop from SPW Expedition. So now we are in question and answer session, Q&A session. So if you have any question, because your mic is not working, you can type in the chat box. I'll try to give you explanation, the answer if you have any query, or you can send me email also at info@sumitphotoworld.com. So anyone who is watching this video, through the live session and all, they can send email and I'll try to help them in their photography. Krishna, you can type in if you have any question, whatever we have discussed so far, or if you have any other question related to photography. Okay, do you know the Nikon D200? Try to be specific that what you want to know about it. It's a device you are talking about. Basically, Nikon devices are mostly they have base functions as same. Even the professional high-end device or entry-level device from Nikon, the base function will be same for all the devices. But there are some additional features which depends on device model. And I'm sorry, but for all device model, if you want someone to know it, then it's very difficult. So we have to find out the manual, and we have to research on the device specific if you want any specific information on the particular model. If you have any question related to photography, you can ask, please. Or what you can do, you can just think of it, and if you get any question in your mind, you can just send me mail. How do you get long exposure photos? Okay, when we discuss shutter speed session, when we discussed about shutter speed, we discussed about that shutter speed is something measurement of time. So how long the shutter remains open. So when you try to get long exposure shot, you have to increase your shutter speed, or you can have to lower down. So in the technical term, when we say increase shutter speed, it means we are talking about higher number. So 1 second, 2 second, 3 seconds. So shutter speed is works in single digits, is seconds only. So when you change shutter speed, they'll show you in fraction of seconds or single digits. So when you are in single digits, they are seconds. So you can have as high or as low as 30 seconds. So 30 seconds is something which you can achieve in your camera. Or if you want to have long exposure more than 30 seconds, then you have to switch to the manual mode. In manual mode, when you go try to go beyond 30 seconds, it'll change the symbol to bulb mode. So bulb mode is something where you control shutter of your cameras. It means when you press shutter release button first time, it'll open the shutter, and after few minutes, when you press the shutter release button again, it'll close the shutter and complete the exposure. So when you are in bulb mode, it is advised you should have remote shutter release or cable shutter release. So you can get long exposure, but you have to get your remote shutter release or cable shutter release. And it is advised to use an application also to find the exposure time. There are many applications available in the market. They are freely available. You can find many applications for long exposure photography to calculate what is the exact time you need to capture. Or there is a very simple or basic trick to find your exposure. You can have your exposure high ISO to somewhere around 6400 and take a photo. So whatever exposure you get in the seconds, you have to take that same image, the same exposure quality in the ISO 100, but the seconds will be converted into minutes. So that is a very basic calculation. You can Google it, how you can calculate the long exposure timings. So there are applications available also in the market, or you can use this formula to calculate your long exposure. But for long exposure, always use tripod. Any other question? I hope the answer is sufficient, or you have any more point here? Okay, so no problem if you don't have any question for now. But if you still get any question which you think you should have answer for, you can send me email, and I'm definitely going to try to help you in your photography with your question, and I'll give you whatever the content I have which will help you to find the right answer. Most welcome. So I'm just going to conclude the session here, and thank you so much for joining. And I just humble request just to submit your feedback also for the session. Let me just give you a link for that. Please submit your feedback on the site, and if you submit your feedback in more than 3-4 lines, then please attach your portfolio photo also, your selfie, so I can publish your feedback on the website. I have testimonial page. You can find free 1-hour demo session for all the courses what I'm offering as a paid. So this is the testimonial page I have on the site. So if you want to nominate your feedback for the testimonial, then please add your feedback in the detail and upload your image also in the same form. And again, thank you so much for joining, and I'm just going to end this session, and I hope you like it and the information will be useful for you. I hope so. Thank you so much for joining today.